All right, I'm starting to see folks jumping on. Good morning, everybody. Looking for some thumbs up. And if folks can let me know if they're seeing and hearing this okay. Hi from Hannah and Mackenzie. Hi, Hannah. Hi, Mackenzie. All right, so we are coming to you for today's virtual keeper chat live from the Buttonwood Park Zoo in New Bedford, Massachusetts. We are actually going to do something a little bit different today. These are two of our new babies, and our education curator Carrie is going to be telling you a little bit about them. And as always, if you have questions, feel free to shout them out in the comments section and we'll kind of answer as we go along. Good morning, Cindy. Hi, Stacy. All right, looks like we've got a few people, so I am gonna turn it right over to Carrie.
Good morning, everybody. We are coming to you live from the zoo's gift store again, which if you've been following us for a while, may give you a hint that we're going to do things a little differently today. We are actually going to have a story time. So we are joined with two of our newer residents. These are two baby pintail, northern pintail ducks. I just gave them a little bit of food. So these are a dabbling duck, which means they like to eat their food in the water. So you may have noticed that I poured some water in here so that they can stop bothering each other. But this is a specially formulated food specifically for baby ducks. We're gonna try and keep them on that today. We'll see how that goes. These are species that are native to our region here. They're found all over Canada and the United States. They do a lot of migrating, so they spend time here in New England around this time of year when they're migrating back north to Canada to their breeding grounds. They spend their summers down, their winters down in southern United States. They're one of our first migrators. And these two are here with us today because their eggs were found abandoned in our bison pasture. There's a number of reasons that could have happened, but they were lucky enough to get put into our incubator and raised up right here. So we are now raising them with the hopes of being able to send them back out. I did bring some pictures of what a northern pintail looks like as an adult because a lot of people aren't familiar with this species. So this is a male northern pintail and this is a female. As you've learned through our other duck talks with our director Keith, the males tend to be a little bit more ornate and beautiful, where the females who have to nest are a little bit duller. So this male is in his breeding coloring, and they're named a northern pintail for this very long spiky tail. So if you could see them from above. All right, so today, since we have some ducklings here with us, we're actually going to read one of my favorite books and a very popular book here in Massachusetts because it takes place in Boston. Hopefully you're all familiar with Make Way for Ducklings. So if you want to read this book, and then I can always take some questions about our friends here at the end. So, and I have a very big book today, so hopefully you'll be able to see it okay. But I thought this book was perfect for this time of year. This is the time of year that we're going to see ducklings around, like our friends here. All right. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were looking for a place to live, but every time Mr. Mallard saw what looked like a nice place, Mrs. Mallard said it was no good. There were sure to be foxes in the woods or turtles in the water, and she was not going to raise a family where there might be foxes or turtles. So they flew on and on. When they got to Boston, they felt too tired to fly any further. There was a nice pond in the public garden with a little island on it. The very place to spend the night, quacked Mr. Mallard. Down they flew. The next morning, they fished for their breakfast in the mud at the bottom of the pond, but they didn't find much. So they're doing exactly what these guys are doing, dabbling for food in the water. Just as they were getting ready to start on their way, a strange, enormous bird came by. It was pushing a boat full of people, and there was a man sitting on its back. Good morning, quacked Mr. Mallard, being polite. The big bird was too proud to answer, but the people on the boat threw peanuts into the water, so the Mallards followed them all round the pond and got another breakfast, better than the first. I like this place, said Mrs. Mallard as they climbed out on the bank and waddled along. Why don't we build a nest and raise our ducklings right in this pond? There are no foxes and no turtles, and the people feed us peanuts. What could be better?" "Good," said Mr. Mallard, delighted that at last Mrs. Mallard had a place that suited her. But... "Squeak! Look out!" squawked Mrs. Mallard, all of a dither. "You'll get run over." And when she got her breath, she added, "This is no place for babies with all those horrid things rushing around. We'll have to look somewhere else." So they flew over Beacon Hill and round the State House, but there was no place there. They looked in Louisburg Square, but there was no water to swim in. Then they flew over the Charles River. "This is better," quacked Mr. Mallard. "That island is a nice quiet place, and it's only a little way from the public garden." "Yes," said Mrs. Mallard, remembering the peanuts. "That looks just like the right place to hatch ducklings." So they chose a cozy spot among the bushes near the water and settled down to build their nest. And only just in time, for now they were beginning to molt. All their old wing feathers started to drop out, and they would not be able to fly again until the new ones grew in. But of course they could swim, and one day they swam over to the park on the river bank, and there they met a policeman named Michael. Michael fed them peanuts, and after that the Mallards called on Michael every day. After Mrs. Mallard had laid 8 eggs in the nest, she couldn't go to visit Michael anymore because she had to sit on the eggs to keep them warm. She moved off the nest only to get a drink of water or to have her lunch or to count the eggs and make sure they were all there. On the day the ducklings hatched, first came Jack, then Cack, then Lack, then Mack and Knack and Quack and Pack and Quack. Mr. and Mrs. Mallard were bursting with pride. It was a great responsibility taking care of so many ducklings, and it kept them very busy. One day, Mr. Mallard decided he'd like to take a trip to see what the rest of the river was like, further on. So off he set. "I'll meet you in a week in the public garden," he quacked over his shoulder. "Take good care of the ducklings." "Don't you worry," said Mrs. Mallard. "I know all about bringing up children," and she did. She taught them how to swim and dive. She taught them to walk in a line, to come when they were called, and to keep a safe distance from bikes and scooters and other things with wheels. When at last she felt perfectly satisfied with them, she said one morning, "Come along, children, follow me." Before you could wink an eyelash, Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack fell into line, just as they had been taught. Mrs. Mallard led the way into the water, and they swam behind her to the opposite bank. There they waded ashore and waddled along till they came to the highway. Mrs. Mallard stepped out to cross the street. Honk, honk went the horns on the speeding cars. Quack went Mrs. Mallard as she tumbled back again. Quack, quack, quack went Jack, Cack, Lack, Mack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack, just as loud as their little quackers could quack. The cars kept speeding by and honking, and Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings kept right on quack, quack, quacking. They made such a noise that Michael came running, waving his arms and blowing his whistle. Honk, honk, quack, quack. He planted himself in the center of the road, raised one hand to stop the traffic, and then beckoned with the other, the way the policemen do for Mrs. Mallard to cross over. As soon as Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings were safe on the other side and on their way down Mount Vernon Street, Michael rushed back to his police booth. He called Clancy at headquarters and said, "There's a family of ducks walking down the street." Clancy said, "Family of what? Ducks?" yelled Michael. "Send a police car, quick." Meanwhile, Mrs. Mallard had reached the corner bookstop and turned onto Charles Street with Jack, Mack, Cack, Lack, Knack, Whack, Pack, and Quack all marching in line behind her. Everyone stared. An old lady from Beacon Hill said, "Isn't it amazing?" And the man who swept the street said, "Well, now ain't that nice?" And when Mrs. Mallard heard them, she was so proud she tipped her nose in the air and walked along with an extra swing in her waddle. When they came to the corner of Beacon Street, there was the police car with the 4 policemen that Clancy had sent from headquarters. The policemen held back the traffic so Mrs. Mallard and the ducklings could march across the street. Here they go. Right on into the public garden. Inside the gate, they all turned round to say thank you to the policeman. The policeman smiled and waved goodbye. It's a tough page. When they reached the pond and swam across the little island, there was Mr. Mallard waiting for them, just as he had promised. The ducklings liked the new island so much that they decided to live there. All day long they followed the swan boats and ate peanuts. And when night falls, they swim to their little island and go to sleep. The end. So hopefully you guys enjoyed that little book. Our ducklings are heading off on an adventure just like the ones in the book. So we're going to see if we can't not have them go too far into the cafe. So Shara, I don't know if any questions came
We've
up.
had a bunch, so lots of good mornings. PJ was wondering what their names are.
So right now these two ducklings don't have names. They are only a few days old. So one was born, let's see, I wrote it down. One was born on May 13th and the other one was born on May 14th. So they're still pretty little and new to us. And we don't name all of our ducks. If you've been following along with these keeper chats, you know that we have quite a few here at the zoo.
Okay. Tegan is with us today and says that she loves this, and we love seeing you, Tegan.
Tegan, thank you so much for your note. It came in the mail today. We really appreciated hearing from you.
So Wendy is asking about the zoo being open, and so as we're sort of gearing up and seeing cities starting to reopen, just tune in and check back often. All of the information on when we will be opening will be definitely up on our Facebook and the zoo's website and city's website, so just stay tuned, because yes, we do miss you. Yep, Dawn, I think these ducklings enjoyed the book too. So Dawn is asking, can you pick them up? Do they like to be picked?
Sure, so since these two are being hand raised, they certainly don't mind. If I go over to them right now, they are definitely going to scatter into the cafe, or into the gift store, which is why I'm going to see if Sharon wants to just kind of go around that way. So they don't mind being held. They don't love it either, but they don't mind. They're certainly comfortable being around us. They know that people give them food. But we also don't want to super imprint them, because eventually they will go back out to the bison pasture where they'll act like regular ducks. And so we want to make sure that they are able to do that.
So Kara, age 8, is asking, why do they have blue things around their feet?
That's a great question. So these guys, we do weigh them almost every day. We want to make sure that they are getting enough food, that they're healthy and eating well. And so their keeper weighs them every day, and that just allows us, because if you look at them, they look identical. So it would be really hard to tell one from the other. So we have a blue band and a green band. And so that's how she keeps track of who's who. Right now, since they are just so much identical to each other. And I do want to mention, in this book, you heard that the policemen and some of the people on the swan boats were feeding the ducks peanuts, which is definitely a favorite activity of people is this time of year, to go out and feed them. And I want to make sure that everyone knows that it's really important that we don't feed them people food. So we don't want to be giving them breads and treats and things like that. It really has no nutritional value for them and can actually cause some deformities, especially in the little guys. So please know that if you want to go out and look for ducks, that's great. We have a lot of amazing species around here, but preferably let them find their own food in their habitats.
So Serenity, oh, hi Kaiden. Kaiden says, never been to the zoo, wants to come whenever possible, and we look forward to seeing you. Serenity Love, age 9, wants to know how tall they are. Can you put your hand next to one of them so they can kind of so you can see that they are very small right now.
Yep, they are, like I said, he's going to yell for his brother, but they're only a few days old, so still tiny, but they grow every day. They really do. And by 4 weeks, by a couple months, they will be fully flighted and ready to go. So they only stay with their parents for a little while.
Let's see if we can kind of hide them back a little bit.
They're okay. They can't get anywhere.
Yeah, they can't.
They can't escape.
They're quick. They're on the move. So that kind of answers how tall they are. I'm just scrolling through to make sure we haven't missed questions. Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay. And it looks like we've kind of answered everybody's questions that have come up so far. And they are just exploring. Yeah, Diane, they are too cute for sure. Let's see how close I can get. So, let's see, Dawn goes to 4-H. They take care of ducks. Their feet are very sharp. Is there anything that can be done to stop that? Well, the bottom of their feet, they do have little claws, which I'm sure, yep, can get sharp, but we don't really do much with these guys because, again, we want them to be acclimated so that when they go back out into the pasture, they're doing what all the other ducks do. So Kaiden is asking what some of the things we do for enrichment are for these guys.
Yeah, so these guys will be getting daily opportunities to go swimming. It's really important for them to get wet and to start to learn how to waterproof their feathers. So we do, in the beginning, when they're little like this, we will want you to eat anything weird. Come on. You can hear they call for each other when they get separated, which is how they find each other and their moms. So in the beginning, they actually swim in our sinks. So they'll swim in a little sink, and then eventually they'll move up to a bigger pool, and eventually they'll be in a kiddie pool. So water is really important, different ways to give them their food. We do give them a little stuffed animal to cuddle with at this age, since they would normally be with mom at bedtime. So yeah, lots of different ways.
So Trinity Heaven, age 7, what a good question, wants to know how fast their heart rate is, how quickly it pumps. And birds have a very high heart rate, over 120 or 130 beats per minute. And Kaiden is asking if they have favorite keeper.
Well, since they're only a few days old, I don't think they've had time to really bond with anybody to have a favorite keeper. They look at us as, the givers of the food, basically.
I do know that one of our keepers, Jess, does a lot with our baby ducklings, and in the very beginning when they need, extra care and even into the night, she is one of our keepers that works with our ducklings. So if I had to
eventually
stretch,
she will definitely be their favorite.
Yeah.
For sure.
What else?
You can see they're pretty messy.
And you can see they're pulling that food in the water. They're kind of getting both their food and their water all in one.
Yeah, so in the wild, they're going to eat lots of bugs, grains, and vegetation out of a pond. So these guys are dabbling ducks. You can see by the shape of their bills. We met those merganser babies a couple weeks ago. They had those really pointy, sharp beaks, whereas these guys have much flatter, broader bills, which would mean that they're a dabbling duck. So what they're doing right now is exactly what they would be doing in the wild, looking for bugs, looking for grains. These are one of the few species that will actually live in neutral land, so they will find a flooded area of crops like corn or wheat, kind of in the middle of the country where they are doing their breeding. But mostly they're going to breed up in Canada where their breeding grounds are.
This is a really good shot of them. They're being really good staying still in that.
You can hear, if you get closer, you can hear them eating.
So Kaiden wants to know, if you were feeding ducks, could you feed them lettuce?
Yes, so if you really, really wanted to feed a duck, lettuce or any kind of green is a great option, for sure.
Yeah. And we do give our guys greens as well.
Not at this age, but definitely
no,
when
yeah,
they get a little
as they get a little bit older. Oh, they're heading back this way.
Cleaning some carpets today.
Oops, yep, so cute. So, you heard from the book that mama doesn't come off the nest very often, but if you do see a nest with eggs in it with no mom on the nest, I would not worry too much, and you definitely don't want to bother that nest.
Yeah, we made sure these eggs were truly abandoned before we went out and brought them to the incubator. So moms will come off to go have a drink, get some food, for a variety of reasons. So you don't necessarily need to worry. You can check on it regularly from a safe distance, so you're not stressing anyone out. Because the other thing is, if you're hanging out near the nest and mom was away getting a drink and then she comes back, she's not going to come back if she sees you there.
Hi, Vinny. Oh, the Vinny from Toe Jam Puppet Band is with us today. We miss seeing you, Vinny, and we miss having our Toe Jam Mondays. Hopefully we'll be able to get back to that some point soon. They are cute, yes. Any other questions from folks that are with us right now? Shout them out. Be happy to answer them.
Show this if anyone's new to joining. This is what these guys will look like when they grow up. These guys are both males, so they'll look like this. These are northern pintails. They're known for their very pointy, long tails. This is what a female looks like.
So
and
big
you can
difference.
see them out in our bison pasture when you come to visit.
Vinny says he misses us very much. We miss you too, Vinny.
They will explore anything.
They will. So once again, these are the adults, what they look like. And you're welcome. Diana's thanking us for all the information. We love sharing this with you guys. You gonna go check out that paper?
I will say the other important thing that we can take away from our book, Make Way for Ducklings, is that this time of year is a very important time of year for a lot of different native species to be crossing roads. So things like turtles, ducklings. So it's really important that we keep our eye out for wildlife when we're driving, and make sure that if we do see something crossing, that we let them safely cross over. It's a very busy time of year out there for wildlife, and we can do our part.
So Vinny's asking, how do we tell the gender of the ducklings? And there's a couple of ways that we can do that. It's very difficult when they're this little. So it takes quite a bit of skill. But you can do what's called vent sexing, where you're looking at their vent and it's different from the male to female. You can also do DNA. There are labs that will help you determine the sex, but really the easiest way is just to wait until they get a little bit older, and as their feathering comes in, it eventually reveals itself, especially with these guys where the males look so different than the females. So there's another close-up of that. And then these guys. Chowing away. I think we've scrolled through all the different questions that folks have. I'm just making sure that I did not miss any. It looks like people have enjoyed the books and we're out of questions. So with that, we're gonna leave you with some close-up shots of these guys today. We hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Just to mention, there is that donate button. We're so thankful for the folks that have donated and continue to donate. Your donations go to our Zoological Society, which helps support all our virtual programming and our special programs, our education, our conservation efforts. Basically helps to support the zoo in so many ways. So we love that folks are donating, and we appreciate those donations. And we'll see you again tomorrow at 11 o'clock.
Thanks, everybody.